One of the most important lessons every empath must learn is to stop seeking validation from other people. This sounds simple on the surface, but for many empaths, it becomes one of the hardest challenges they will ever face. Empaths are naturally tuned into the emotions, reactions, and needs of the people around them. They can often sense disappointment before a word is spoken, frustration before it is expressed, and approval before it is given. Because of this heightened awareness, many empaths unconsciously develop a habit of measuring their worth through the responses of others. They begin to believe that if everyone around them is happy, then they are valuable. If everyone approves of them, then they are enough. If everyone accepts them, then they are safe. The problem begins when an empath slowly hands over control of their self-worth to other people. Instead of deciding for themselves who they are, they allow the opinions, moods, and judgments of others to define them. They become emotional weather vanes, constantly turning in the direction of external approval. When someone praises them, they feel confident. When someone criticizes them, they feel crushed. Their emotional state becomes dependent on forces they cannot control. What makes this even more dangerous is that some people quickly recognize this pattern. They learn that the empath can be influenced through approval and rejection. A compliment becomes a reward. Silence becomes a punishment. Validation becomes a tool of control. The empath may not even realize it is happening. They simply continue working harder, giving more, sacrificing more, and abandoning more of themselves in the hope of earning acceptance. Over time, this creates a life built around performance rather than authenticity. The empath starts asking dangerous questions. What do they want me to say? How do they want me to act? What version of myself will make them stay? Instead of expressing their true thoughts and feelings, they begin creating a character designed to receive approval. The tragedy is that the more successful they become at pleasing others, the more disconnected they become from themselves. Many empaths spend years believing that being liked is the same thing as being loved. It is not. Being liked often requires adaptation. Being loved requires authenticity. People can like a version of you that is carefully edited and designed to meet their expectations. But real connection only happens when someone knows who you truly are. The constant pursuit of validation prevents that from happening because it encourages hiding rather than honesty. The turning point comes when the empath realizes something powerful. No amount of external approval can permanently fill an internal void. Even if everyone approves of you today, tomorrow there will be new expectations, new criticisms, and new judgments. The pursuit never ends because the problem was never outside. The problem was believing that other people had the authority to determine your value. True confidence begins when an empath decides that their worth is not a public vote. It is not determined by popularity, agreement, praise, or recognition. It comes from self-respect. It comes from knowing who you are even when nobody applauds. It comes from standing by your values even when others disagree. It comes from understanding that your identity should be rooted in your character, not in the reactions of the people around you. The moment an empath stops chasing validation, something remarkable happens. Their relationships become healthier, their decisions become clearer, their boundaries become stronger. They stop negotiating their value and start living from a place of certainty. They no longer need everyone to understand them, approve of them, or choose them. They choose themselves first, and that changes everything. One of the most transformative lessons an empath can learn is that not everyone deserves access to their energy. This truth often arrives after years of disappointment, emotional exhaustion, and relationships that leave them feeling drained rather than fulfilled. Empaths are naturally generous with their attention, compassion, and emotional support. They have an incredible ability to understand what others are feeling, even when those feelings remain unspoken. Because of this gift, they often become the people everyone turns to during difficult times. Friends seek their advice, family members rely on their understanding, and strangers are often drawn to their warmth. While this ability to connect deeply with others is a strength, it can also become a weakness when an empath fails to recognize that their energy is valuable and limited. Many empaths grow up believing that kindness means always being available. They feel guilty when they say no. They worry about disappointing people. They fear appearing selfish if they prioritize their own needs. As a result, they develop a habit of giving without limits. They listen when they are emotionally exhausted. They help when they have nothing left to offer. They sacrifice their own peace to solve problems that do not belong to them. Over time, this pattern becomes so normal that they stop noticing how much it is costing them. The reality is that energy functions much like any other valuable resource. If you constantly give it away without replenishing it, eventually there will be nothing left. An empath who continually absorbs the emotions of others without protecting themselves often experiences mental fatigue, emotional burnout, and a growing sense of resentment. They may begin to feel overwhelmed by interactions that once brought them joy. They may withdraw from people entirely because they no longer have the strength to carry everyone else's burdens. One of the hardest truths for an empath to accept is that some people are not interested in mutual connection. They are interested in access. They seek someone who will listen endlessly, support endlessly, and forgive endlessly without offering the same level of care in return. These individuals may not always be intentionally harmful, but the imbalance they create can be destructive. They take emotional resources without considering the impact on the empath who provides them. Because empaths tend to see the good in others, they often ignore warning signs. They make excuses for unhealthy behavior. They justify repeated disrespect. They convince themselves that if they give enough love, patience, or understanding, the situation will improve. Unfortunately, not everyone responds to kindness with gratitude. Some respond by demanding more. What begins as generosity can become an invitation for exploitation. Healthy boundaries are the solution, yet boundaries often feel uncomfortable for empaths. Setting limits may initially seem harsh or unkind. In reality, boundaries are not walls designed to keep people out. They are filters designed to protect what matters most. They allow an empath to decide who earns deeper access to their time, attention, and emotional investment. They separate genuine relationships from one-sided connections. When an empath learns to protect their energy, they begin making different choices. They stop feeling responsible for fixing every problem. They stop answering every demand placed upon them. They recognize that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. They understand that caring about someone does not mean carrying them. Most importantly, they realize that preserving their own well-being is not selfish. It is necessary. The strongest empaths are not those who give endlessly until they collapse. The strongest empaths are those who understand the value of their energy and choose carefully where it goes. They know that their kindness is a gift, not an obligation. They understand that access to their emotional world must be earned through respect, trust, and reciprocity. Once they learn this lesson, they stop allowing everyone into their inner space and start reserving their energy for the people and experiences that truly deserve it. Perhaps one of the most painful lessons an empath must learn is that you cannot heal people who refuse to heal themselves. This realization does not come easily because empaths are naturally drawn toward helping others. They notice pain that most people overlook. They sense emotional wounds hidden beneath smiles, confidence, and carefully constructed masks. When they encounter someone who is struggling, their instinct is often to help, support, encourage, and guide that person toward a better path. It comes from a place of genuine compassion. They want people to feel understood. They want suffering to end. They want the people they care about to become the best versions of themselves. The problem begins when an empath mistakes caring for someone with being responsible for them. At first, the difference seems small, but over time it becomes enormous. Caring means offering support while respecting another person's choices. Taking responsibility means believing that someone else's happiness, growth, or recovery depends entirely on your efforts. Many empaths unknowingly cross this line. They become emotionally invested in fixing people who have no intention of changing. Because empaths can often see potential in others, they focus on who a person could become rather than who that person currently is. They see intelligence beneath insecurity. They see kindness beneath anger. They see strength beneath fear. While this ability can be beautiful, it can also be dangerous. It causes the empath to become attached to possibilities instead of realities. They stay in unhealthy relationships because they believe improvement is just around the corner. They continue giving chances because they see hidden potential. They invest years trying to help someone become the person they believe they can be. What many empaths eventually discover is that potential means very little without willingness. A person can have incredible capacity for growth, but if they refuse to take responsibility for their actions, nothing changes. A person can receive endless advice, support, encouragement, and love, yet remain exactly where they are if they are unwilling to do the work themselves. No amount of compassion can replace personal accountability. This becomes especially painful when the empath pours their heart into helping someone who repeatedly chooses destructive behaviors. They listen to the same complaints over and over. They provide the same guidance countless times. They offer emotional support through crisis after crisis. Yet the person never changes. Instead, they continue making the same decisions and creating the same problems. The empath becomes trapped in a cycle of rescuing, hoping, and being disappointed. One reason this pattern continues is because helping others often gives the empath a sense of purpose. They feel needed, they feel valuable, they feel important in someone's life. Unfortunately, this can create an unhealthy dynamic where the empath becomes dependent on being the helper. They may ignore their own needs while focusing entirely on someone else's struggles. Their identity becomes tied to saving people. Over time, this role becomes exhausting. The empath begins carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. They worry constantly about someone else's choices. They lose sleep over problems they cannot solve. They feel guilty when their efforts fail, even though the outcome was never truly within their control. The weight becomes heavier with each passing year. The truth that finally changes everything is understanding that transformation is always an inside job. No one can force another person to grow. No one can make someone heal before they are ready. No one can create motivation, accountability, or self-awareness for another human being. These things must come from within. Support can help, guidance can help, encouragement can help, but only the individual can decide to take action. When an empath accepts this reality, they begin to experience a different kind of freedom. They stop measuring their worth by their ability to save others. They stop feeling responsible for outcomes they cannot control. They learn to offer support without carrying the entire burden. They understand that love is not about rescuing someone from themselves. Real love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. It means respecting their journey even when that journey includes mistakes, setbacks, and lessons they must learn on their own. Instead of exhausting themselves trying to heal those who refuse to change, they redirect that energy toward their own growth, their own peace, and the people who are genuinely willing to help themselves. Being kind does not mean being available all the time. This is one of the most important lessons an empath can learn, yet it is often one of the last lessons they truly understand. Many empaths grow up believing that kindness requires constant sacrifice. They think that being a good person means always saying yes, always listening, always helping, and always putting other people's needs before their own. Because of their deep sensitivity to emotions, they naturally feel compelled to support those around them. When someone is hurting, they want to help. When someone is struggling, they want to provide comfort. When someone feels alone, they want to be present. These qualities make empaths compassionate and caring individuals, but they can also lead them into patterns of emotional exhaustion. The problem begins when kindness becomes confused with obligation. An empath may start believing that they are responsible for everyone's emotional well-being. They answer every phone call, respond to every message, and make themselves available whenever someone needs support. At first, this behavior may feel rewarding. People appreciate their presence. Friends and family rely on them. They become known as the dependable person who is always there. But over time, this constant availability creates an unhealthy expectation. People begin to assume the empath will always be accessible regardless of the circumstances. Many empaths struggle to recognize when helping others is starting to harm themselves. They push through exhaustion because they do not want to disappoint anyone. They ignore their own emotional needs because someone else's problems seem more urgent. They cancel personal plans, neglect self-care, and sacrifice valuable time in order to meet the expectations of others. Eventually, they find themselves emotionally drained, mentally fatigued, and disconnected from their own lives. What makes this situation even more difficult is the guilt that often accompanies boundaries. When an empath considers saying no, they may immediately feel selfish. They worry that others will think they no longer care. They fear being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. As a result, they continue giving beyond their limits even when they desperately need rest. They convince themselves that one more conversation, one more favor, or one more sacrifice will not matter. Yet these small acts accumulate until they become overwhelming. The truth is that kindness loses its strength when it comes from depletion rather than choice. Genuine compassion should flow from a place of abundance, not exhaustion. An empath who is constantly running on empty cannot offer their best support to anyone. Their emotional reserves become depleted, making it difficult to maintain healthy relationships or even enjoy daily life. Learning to separate kindness from availability changes everything. It allows the empath to understand that caring about someone does not require unlimited access to their time and energy. They can love people while still protecting their peace. They can support others without abandoning themselves. They can choose when and how they engage, rather than feeling obligated to respond to every demand. The most emotionally healthy empaths recognize that their needs matter too. They understand that rest is not selfish, boundaries are not cruel, and personal space is not rejection. They stop viewing their value through the lens of how much they can give. Instead, they learn that true kindness includes extending the same compassion to themselves that they so freely offer to others. When they finally embrace this lesson, they begin creating relationships built on mutual respect rather than constant sacrifice, allowing their generosity to remain a gift instead of becoming a burden. One of the greatest powers an empath can develop is the ability to walk away. For many empaths, this lesson takes years to learn because their natural instinct is to stay. They stay when relationships become difficult. They stay when they are misunderstood. They stay when they are unappreciated. They stay because they believe every problem can be solved with enough patience, understanding, and love. Their compassionate nature encourages them to see possibilities where others see dead ends. While this can be admirable, it can also become a trap when staying causes more harm than growth. Empaths often form deep emotional connections. They do not invest lightly in people, which is why letting go can feel so painful. When they care about someone, they remember the good moments, the promises that were made, and the potential they once saw in the relationship. Even when clear signs suggest it is time to move on, they may continue holding on because they hope things will improve. They convince themselves that if they try harder, communicate better, or give more understanding, the situation will eventually change. Unfortunately, not every relationship is meant to be saved. Some connections become unhealthy, one-sided, or emotionally draining. In these situations, the empath often finds themselves giving far more than they receive. They provide support, patience, and forgiveness while receiving little respect or appreciation in return. Yet they remain because walking away feels like failure. They worry that leaving means giving up on someone they care about. The truth is that walking away is not always an act of weakness. In many cases, it is an act of wisdom. It requires courage to recognize when a situation is no longer serving your well-being. It requires strength to accept that some people are unwilling to meet you halfway. Most importantly, it requires self-respect to choose your own peace over constant emotional struggle. Many empaths fear that leaving makes them selfish. In reality, staying in situations that continuously damage your mental and emotional health is not a sign of compassion. It is often a sign that boundaries have been ignored for too long. There comes a point when protecting yourself becomes necessary, not because you lack empathy, but because you finally understand that your well-being matters too. The strongest empath is not the one who endures endless pain for the sake of loyalty. The strongest empath is the one who recognizes when their energy is being wasted, their kindness is being taken for granted, and their presence is no longer valued. They understand that walking away does not erase the love they once felt. It simply means they have chosen growth over suffering, self-respect over desperation, and peace over chaos. That decision often becomes the moment they truly reclaim their power. The final lesson every empath must learn is that their peace is more valuable than any relationship. This truth often arrives after years of emotional struggle, repeated disappointments, and countless attempts to preserve connections that were slowly draining their spirit. Empaths are naturally relationship-oriented people. They care deeply, love sincerely, and invest tremendous emotional energy into the people who matter to them. Because of this, they often place relationships at the center of their lives, believing that maintaining harmony is one of their most important responsibilities. In the beginning, this mindset can seem noble. The empath becomes the peacemaker, the listener, and the person who is always willing to work through conflict. They sacrifice their comfort to avoid arguments. They silence their own needs to keep others happy. They tolerate behaviors that make them uncomfortable because they fear losing the connection. Over time, however, these sacrifices begin to accumulate. What starts as compromise slowly becomes self-abandonment. Many empaths struggle with the idea of putting themselves first. They worry that prioritizing their own well-being will make them appear selfish or uncaring. As a result, they continue investing in relationships that demand more and more while giving less and less in return. They remain loyal even when their kindness is taken for granted. They continue showing up even when they feel emotionally exhausted. They keep hoping that their patience and understanding will eventually create the change they desire. The problem is that peace cannot survive in environments where respect is absent. No matter how much love an empath offers, a relationship cannot thrive if it consistently creates anxiety, emotional confusion, or emotional pain. Yet many empaths stay because they focus on preserving the relationship rather than protecting themselves. They become so determined to save the connection that they forget to save their own peace. Eventually, life teaches them a difficult but necessary lesson. Not every relationship is worth the cost of their mental and emotional well-being. Some connections require too much sacrifice. Some people create constant drama, conflict, or instability. Others repeatedly cross boundaries and ignore the empath's needs. In these situations, holding on often causes more damage than letting go. When an empath finally understands the value of inner peace, their perspective begins to change. They stop asking whether a relationship can be saved and start asking whether it is healthy. They stop measuring success by how long they can endure discomfort and start measuring it by how well they protect their emotional balance. They recognize that peace is not something to be traded away for approval, attention, or companionship. A peaceful mind allows an empath to think clearly, love genuinely, and live authentically. It provides the emotional stability needed to navigate life's challenges without becoming overwhelmed. Once they understand that their peace is a priceless asset, they become more selective about who they allow into their lives. They stop tolerating chaos disguised as love, and stop confusing emotional exhaustion with loyalty. Instead, they choose relationships that support their growth, respect their boundaries, and contribute to the sense of calm they have worked so hard to create. Their peace becomes non-negotiable, and that decision transforms every aspect of their life.